The Malice at the Palace. On November 19, 2004, during an NBA regular season game between the Indiana Pacers and the Detroit Pistons at the Palace of Auburn Hills in Michigan, with less than a minute left in the game, the Pacers were leading 97-82. Indiana forward Ron Artest committed a hard foul on Pistons center Ben Wallace during a layup attempt. Wallace reacted by shoving Artest in the face, sparking a confrontation between the two teams. Players, referees, and coaches intervened to prevent an escalation, but tensions remained high. While officials attempted to restore order, Artest distanced himself from the players by lying on the scorer's table. At that moment, a fan in the stands threw a cup of soda that hit Artest in the chest and face. Artest immediately ran into the stands, confronting the suspected fan. This act triggered a massive brawl involving multiple players and spectators. Several Pacers players, including Stephen Jackson and Jermaine O'Neal, entered the stands or engaged with fans who had come onto the court. The scene devolved into chaos as punches were thrown, objects were hurled, and security struggled to regain control. The game was stopped, and the remaining time was never played. Following the incident, the NBA conducted an extensive investigation using video evidence and eyewitness accounts. The league issued some of the harshest penalties in NBA history. Ron Artest was suspended for the remainder of the season, totaling 86 games. Stephen Jackson was suspended for 30 games. Jermaine O'Neal for 25 games, later reduced to 15 upon appeal, and Ben Wallace for 6 games. Several other players received shorter suspensions. Additionally, multiple fans were charged with assault and banned from attending Pistons home games. The event led to significant changes in NBA security protocols, including increased security personnel, stricter enforcement of fan conduct, and revised policies for interactions between players and spectators. The Malice at the Palace remains one of the most infamous incidents in professional sports history due to its violence, public fallout, and the lasting impact it had on the league's image and operation. Kobe's helicopter crash. On the morning of January 26, 2020, Kobe Bryant, his 13-year-old daughter Gianna, and 7 others were involved in a tragic helicopter crash. They were on their way from John Wayne Airport in Orange County to Camarillo Airport, planning to reach the Mamba Sports Academy in Thousand Oaks for a youth basketball tournament. The pilot was Ara Zobayan, a highly experienced aviator who often flew Bryant. The flight took off at 9:06 a.m. under visual flight rules, which depend on the pilot's ability to navigate using outside visibility rather than solely relying on instruments. That morning, thick fog blanketed much of the Los Angeles area, with visibility so poor that local law enforcement agencies had grounded their own helicopters. Despite the conditions, the flight continued north and then west toward its destination. At around 9:33 a.m., the helicopter was placed in a holding pattern near Burbank due to traffic and low visibility, remaining there for about 12 minutes. Once cleared, the pilot followed the 101 freeway west before turning toward the Calabasas area. In an apparent attempt to climb above the fog, the helicopter ascended to roughly 2,300 feet. Seconds later, it entered a rapid descent at high speed. At 9:45 a.m., the helicopter struck a hillside at about 185 miles per hour, killing everyone on board instantly. The wreckage erupted in flames, making recovery operations challenging. After a year-long investigation, the National Transportation Safety Board concluded in February 2021 that the cause of the crash was the pilot's decision to continue flying under visual rules into heavy cloud cover, leading to spatial disorientation. This condition can cause a pilot to lose awareness of the aircraft's position and orientation, especially in low visibility environments. The investigation found no evidence of mechanical failure. The loss of Kobe Bryant, a 5-time NBA champion and global sports icon, sent shockwaves around the world. Vigils, murals, and memorials appeared in cities across the globe, and a public memorial at the Staples Center drew thousands. In the aftermath, there were renewed calls for stricter helicopter safety measures, including mandatory terrain awareness systems and more rigorous instrument flight training for conditions like those on the day of the crash. Rudy's near-death punch. December 9, 1977. Lakers forward Kermit Washington and Rockets player Kevin Cunnert were scuffling during a game between Houston and Los Angeles at the Forum. Washington, a 6'8" enforcer known for his physical play, had been grappling with Cunnert near the free throw line when the situation escalated. Rockets forward Rudy Tomjanovich was running across the court at full speed to break up what he thought was just another basketball fight. As Ruby approached from behind, Washington suddenly spun around and saw him charging forward at full sprint. Washington later claimed he thought Ruby was attacking him. Without hesitation or warning, Washington threw a devastating right-handed punch directly at Tomjanovich's approaching face. The collision was perfectly timed for maximum destruction. The timing created catastrophic force. Tomjanovich's forward momentum combined with Washington's powerful punch generated an impact equivalent to being hit by a fastball. The blow instantly dropped Tomjanovich to the court, where he landed face first in a rapidly expanding pool of his own blood. The sickening sound of the impact echoed throughout the arena, immediately silencing the crowd. Players from both teams stopped fighting and stared in horror. Ruby laid motionless as blood poured from his face onto the hardwood. His teammate Mike Newland later said Tomjanovich's face looked like hamburger meat. The punch had caused multiple life-threatening injuries. Tomjanovich suffered a fractured skull, broken nose, broken jaw, and 2 broken cheekbones. Most dangerously, spinal fluid began leaking from his brain into his mouth, creating a metallic taste he would never forget and indicating severe brain trauma. Emergency medical personnel rushed Tomjanovich to Centinela Hospital, where he spent the next 4 days fighting for his life in intensive care. His face was so grotesquely swollen and disfigured that his wife had difficulty recognizing him. Doctors warned his family that he might not survive the first 48 hours due to the brain injury complications. The reconstruction of his face required multiple surgeries over several months. Surgeons had to rebuild his cheekbones, reconstruct his jaw, and repair his tear ducts. Tomjanovich was forced to sip liquids through a straw for weeks because his jaw was wired shut. The NBA handed down unprecedented punishment. Commissioner Larry O'Brien suspended Washington for 60 days and fined him $10,000, the harshest penalty in league history at that time. Washington's teammates were also fined for leaving the bench during the altercation. Tomjanovich's promising career effectively ended with that single punch. Though he eventually returned to play 23 more games, he was never again the same explosive player who had averaged over 20 points per game. The incident became known simply as the punch and forced the NBA to implement much stricter rules governing on-court violence. Bison Dele. On July 7, 2002, former NBA player Bison Dele vanished under circumstances that would lead to one of the most chilling mysteries in league history. Dele, a 6'10 center who had played for the Orlando Magic, Denver Nuggets, Los Angeles Clippers, Chicago Bulls, and Detroit Pistons, had retired abruptly in 1999 at the height of his career to travel the world. By 2002, he was living a nomadic lifestyle, often sailing the South Pacific aboard his catamaran, the Hakuna Matata. That summer, Dele set sail from Tahiti with his girlfriend Serena Carlin, his older brother Miles Daybird, and the boat's captain Bertrand Saldo. The voyage was meant to be a short trip between islands, but after July 8th, no one other than Daybird was ever seen again. Daybird later returned alone to Tahiti, piloting Dele's boat and carrying his brother's passport, credit cards, and personal belongings. He gave conflicting stories to authorities and family members, initially claiming Dele and the others had stayed behind on another island. When pressed, Daybird's account shifted, raising suspicions. Investigators pieced together evidence suggesting that an altercation had occurred aboard the boat, during which Serena Carlin was allegedly killed accidentally. According to this theory, Dele and Captain Saldo were killed afterward to eliminate witnesses, and their bodies were likely buried at sea. By September 2002, U.S. and French Polynesian authorities were actively investigating Daybird as the sole suspect in the presumed murders. Before he could be extradited, Daybird fled to the United States, where he overdosed on insulin in what appeared to be a suicide attempt. He fell into a coma and died on September 27, 2002, without ever providing a full account of what happened during that voyage. No bodies were ever recovered, and the Hakuna Matata was found stripped of identifying markings. The mystery surrounding Bison Dele's disappearance remains unsolved, with investigators relying on circumstantial evidence and Daybird's contradictory statements to piece together events. The case has since been cited as one of the most haunting and unresolved tragedies involving a professional athlete, leaving a mystery that may never be conclusively answered. Magic Johnson's announcement. November 7, 1991. The Los Angeles Lakers called an emergency press conference at the Forum, but no one outside the organization knew why. Rumors swirled through the basketball world as Magic Johnson entered the packed press room with his wife Cookie by his side. The 32-year-old Lakers legend had just completed his routine physical examination before the 1991-92 season when team doctors delivered devastating news. Johnson stepped to the microphone and delivered words that were tantamount to announcing his own death sentence. "Because of the HIV virus I have obtained, I will have to retire today from the Lakers," Johnson announced. The room fell silent. Many seasoned sports reporters began crying as they processed what they had just heard. In 1991, an HIV diagnosis was essentially considered a death sentence, with most patients dying within 2 years. The announcement sent shockwaves throughout America. At the time, many Americans viewed AIDS as solely a gay white man's disease. Magic Johnson's diagnosis shattered that misconception and brought HIV/AIDS into mainstream households for the first time. Johnson had contracted the virus through unprotected heterosexual sex, admitting to having multiple sexual partners while traveling with the team. The timing was particularly devastating for basketball fans. Magic was still playing at elite level and had just led the Lakers to the NBA Finals against Michael Jordan's Bulls the previous season. His career was far from over in terms of basketball ability. The news dominated every major television network and newspaper. My ignorance could cost me my life, but I wanted to try and ensure that no one else would become infected with HIV for the same reason, Johnson wrote in Sports Illustrated. He immediately used his platform to educate the public about HIV prevention. Johnson's announcement forced the NBA to confront HIV in professional sports for the first time. There were no established protocols for HIV-positive players, and fears about transmission through basketball contact created uncertainty about potential returns to play. The basketball legend became the most famous face of HIV/AIDS in America overnight. His diagnosis brought unprecedented attention to HIV research funding and awareness campaigns, marking the end of one of the most successful NBA careers while launching his new role as an HIV/AIDS advocate. Gilbert Arenas. On December 21, 2009, Washington Wizards star Gilbert Arenas became the central figure in one of the NBA's most controversial off-court incidents when reports emerged that he had brought firearms into the team's locker room at the Verizon Center. The events began with a dispute between Arenas and teammate Javaris Crittenton over an unpaid gambling debt from a card game played on a team flight days earlier. According to Arenas, the disagreement escalated verbally, but he did not take the threat seriously. 2 days later, Arenas brought 4 unloaded handguns into the Wizards' locker room, placing them in Crittenton's locker with a note that read something to the effect of, "Pick one." Arenas later claimed the act was meant as a joke, not a genuine threat, emphasizing that the guns were not loaded and that he had no intention of harming anyone. Crittenton, however, responded by producing his own firearm from his bag, loaded, according to later reports. The situation ended without physical violence, but word of the locker room confrontation spread quickly. On December 24th, Arenas publicly admitted to bringing the guns to the arena, again asserting his version that it was an ill-conceived joke and insisted he never pointed a weapon at anyone. The NBA and law enforcement treated the matter seriously. District of Columbia law prohibits the possession of firearms in the city without proper licensing, and Arenas did not have the necessary permits. He voluntarily met with authorities and surrendered the weapons. On January 6, 2010, NBA Commissioner David Stern suspended Arenas indefinitely, citing conduct detrimental to the league. The suspension became the remainder of the 2009-10 season, 50 games in total. Arenas later pleaded guilty to a felony count of carrying an unlicensed pistol and received 2 years probation, community service, and a fine. While Arenas maintained throughout that the incident was a misguided joke and not an actual threat, the consequences were severe. His reputation took a significant hit, endorsement opportunities vanished, and his career trajectory shifted. The incident also reinforced the NBA's zero-tolerance stance on guns in team facilities and heightened scrutiny over player conduct off the court. For Arenas, it became a defining moment, one he has repeatedly described as a costly lapse in judgment rather than an act of malice. Wright's murder. July 18, 2010. Former NBA player Lorenzen Wright was spending time in his hometown of Memphis when his ex-wife Shara Wright Robinson called him. The 34-year-old retired center had played 13 seasons in the NBA, including 5 years with the Memphis Grizzlies. Shara told Wright she needed to meet someone to pick up money and asked him to accompany her to a wooded area off Callis Cutoff Road in southeast Memphis. Wright, who stood 6'11" and remained protective of his ex-wife despite their troubled relationship, agreed to help. At 12:05 a.m. on July 19th, Wright's cell phone automatically dialed 911. The emergency dispatcher heard a garbled voice saying, "Goddamn," before 11 gunshots rang out through the phone. Wright was unable to give his name or location before the call cut out. The dispatcher failed to immediately report the call or alert patrol officers, causing a critical delay. Shara had orchestrated an elaborate murder plot with her friend Billy Ray Turner, who was hiding in the woods. As soon as Wright stepped out of the vehicle, Turner began shooting him execution style. Wright was shot multiple times, twice in the head, twice near his heart, and once in his forearm. Wright's body remained undiscovered for 10 agonizing days while his family desperately searched. On July 28, 2010, his decomposing remains were finally found in the swampy field riddled with bullet wounds. The discovery sent shockwaves through Memphis and the NBA community. The murder investigation went cold for 7 years until December 2017, when authorities arrested Shara Wright Robinson and Billy Ray Turner. The motive was revealed to be financial. Shara stood to collect a $1 million life insurance policy upon Wright's death. In 2019, Shara Wright Robinson pleaded guilty to facilitating first-degree murder and received a 30-year prison sentence. Billy Ray Turner was convicted of first-degree murder in 2022 and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Jordan's murder. On July 23, 1993, James Jordan, the father of NBA superstar Michael Jordan, was murdered in what initially appeared to be a random act of violence, but later revealed deeper details about the circumstances. At the time, Michael Jordan had just led the Chicago Bulls to their third consecutive NBA championship and was at the height of his fame. His father was more than just a parent. He was his closest confidant, advisor, and traveling companion, often seen courtside during games. James Jordan had attended a funeral in Wilmington, North Carolina earlier that day. Later that night, while driving his red Lexus SC400, a luxury car gifted to him by Michael, he pulled over on the side of US Highway 74 in Robeson County, reportedly to rest. Sometime in the early morning hours of July 23rd, 18-year-old Daniel Green and 18-year-old Larry Demery approached the vehicle. According to court testimony, their intention was to rob him. But during the encounter, James Jordan was shot once in the chest. Rather than alerting authorities, the attackers disposed of his body in a swampy area of South Carolina, where it remained undiscovered for 11 days. The car was later found stripped and items taken from it, including 2 NBA championship rings given to Michael by the Bulls, helped investigators connect the crime to the suspects. When James Jordan's body was finally identified through dental records, the news stunned the sports world. In 1996, both Green and Demery were convicted in connection with the murder. Demery testified against Green in exchange for a reduced sentence and claimed that Green fired the fatal shot. Green has maintained his innocence, insisting that he was involved in the robbery but not the killing, and his legal team continues to pursue appeals. Bias overdose. On June 17, 1986, the Boston Celtics believed they had secured the perfect heir to Larry Bird's dynasty. 2 days earlier, they had selected Len Bias with the second overall pick in the NBA draft. Bias was a 6'8" forward from the University of Maryland, a dominant college scorer with elite athleticism, soft shooting touch, and the kind of explosiveness that had scouts comparing him to Michael Jordan. He was expected to join a veteran Celtics roster that had just won the NBA championship, ensuring their dominance for years to come. On June 16, 1986, Bias traveled to Boston to meet with Celtics officials, sign endorsement deals, including a major one with Reebok, and celebrate the beginning of his professional career. He returned to Maryland later that night, seemingly on top of the world. In the early morning hours of June 19th, after spending the night with friends and teammates at an off-campus dorm suite, Bias used cocaine. According to witnesses, it was his first major exposure to the drug in a party setting. Shortly after ingesting it, Bias collapsed. His friends initially thought he was having a seizure, but he quickly lost consciousness. Paramedics arrived within minutes and transported him to Leland Memorial Hospital, where attempts to revive him failed. At 8:55 a.m., Len Bias was pronounced dead, just 48 hours after being drafted. The Maryland State Medical Examiner determined the cause of death was cardiac arrhythmia induced by cocaine intoxication. The drug had triggered an irregular heartbeat so severe that it stopped his heart. Despite speculation, there was no evidence of long-term drug use. The official conclusion was that a single night of heavy cocaine consumption was enough to kill him. Bias's death stunned the sports world and had far-reaching consequences beyond basketball. It became a central catalyst for sweeping changes in U.S. drug laws, leading to the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986, which introduced harsher mandatory minimum sentences for drug offenses. For the Celtics, it marked the abrupt end of what could have been a dynasty extension. For the NBA, it was a sobering moment, a reminder that even the brightest young star could be gone in an instant. Drugs in the 80s wasn't the only dark times in the NBA. Click the video on the screen to watch every NBA story too dark for ESPN.